Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. Today we prepare for the Lent, and there are two things I want to do today in the sermon. The first one is I want to do a little Bible study with you on the Gospels that we're reading these days. Just this Sunday and next Sunday will be almost from the same. The second thing, there's a focus in the readings of the weekend on a specific item. So the pieces that we read today and next week is coming from a very specific place. And the church wants us to study this very well. It is the Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount. And the Sermon on the Mount are 3 chapters in St. Matthew. Chapter 5 of Matthew, chapter 6 of Matthew, and chapter 7 of Matthew. So 3 chapters in the Gospel of St. Matthew, 5, 6, and 7. They are defined, titled, the Sermon on the Mount. So that's why I'm going to go there. That's our first part, to get the whole 3 chapters. I'm not going to read them, but we'll talk about them so that when you go home and read them, this is how we begin our Lent. This is going to be the readings, the Gospel of this week is going to be from chapter 6. So what is in chapter 5? In chapter 5, Jesus sees a big crowd. Then he climbs up a hill. You know, there's no big mountains really in Israel. So in their terms, they call it the mountain. It's a hill around the Sea of Galilee. Then he sat down. The disciples came to him. Then he opened his mouth and taught them, saying. So they call it the Sermon on the Mount because Jesus gave it sitting on a mount. What does it start with? Blessed are the poor in spirit. The Beatitudes, we call them the Beatitudes. And I recommend, as we learned before, and we are going to continue to teach every single person, they need to know the Beatitudes by heart. It is very unexpected that any Christian does not know the Beatitudes by heart. So if you ask any Jew in the old times, what do you know? They would tell you, we would know the 10 Commandments. This is a must know. As the 10 Commandments were for the Jews, the Beatitudes and the Sermon on the Mount is for us. And all those who studied the book of Matthew, they say, why Matthew writes this piece starting from Jesus climbing a mountain? They say, right there, he wants to show us Jesus as the new Moses. Moses gave the Israelites the law in the old. Jesus is giving us a new law in the new. So this is the beginning. There's a lot in the Gospel of St. Matthew that says the same thing. Jesus is the new Moses. In fact, Jesus is the one who gave Moses the old law. So, the first chapter 5, to make it short, the first chapter is laws, commandments. We must know. The first chapter is commandments we must know. In the old times, the commandments were actually written in a negative way. You shall not have other gods before me. You shall not make yourself an image to worship. You shall not say the Lord's name in vain. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness. You shall not covet. Only 2 positive. Keep the Lord's day holy and honor your father and mother. Only 2. The rest of them, the 8, are all you shall not. So what happened if I do what I should not? You get killed. The punishment of most of it, not all of it, is death, maybe except stealing and bearing false witness and coveting. Or except those three, the rest is put up for capital punishment, stoning to death. Look at what Jesus is starting our new law with. Blessed, he says, blessed are those who are poor in spirit. He starts by asking us to think about what happened when we follow the new commandments. To be humble, to be thirsty and hungry for righteousness. He's inviting us and enticing us to do like the Father, to be like God. The old one says, do not be like the devil. You're going to die if you are going to be like the devil. The new one says, be like God. So the first chapter is about commandments. I'm going to tell you why also this is true. Because after he finished the Beatitudes, what does he say after the last piece? And by the way, we read and we say the Beatitudes every day. Anybody knows where and when? The gospel of the 6th hour. We say it every day. It's very important. It's extremely important that we know it by heart. So it ends this by being the salt. We are the salt of the earth and the light of the world. And then he says, immediately after I finish Beatitudes, do not think that I came to destroy the law or the prophets. I did not come to destroy but to fulfill. He's moving us to think about the old law in new terms. He said, even heaven and earth will pass away, but the law, even old or new, will not pass away. So what he's saying here, he said, you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not murder. Where is that? The old law. So we're still in this chapter that we are going to title the new law. In this chapter, Jesus is comparing the new to the old. He said, let me just explain to you what does it mean, you shall not murder. And he said three things. One, to be angry with someone with no good cause. What do we call that? I think we call it dumping, scapegoating. You get angry, frustrated for some reason, and you don't know how to deal with it. You pick on the smallest and the puniest people around you, or the people that will not retaliate, or the people that will not give you a hard time, or not be angry with you, and you give it to them. You dump it on them. That's called being angry without a cause. A husband, I'm just going to give the easiest example in my mind, gets a hard time from his boss at work. He goes home, and the rest is known. He's in a very bad mood, and then what? Who gets it? Or, if the wife is strong, the kids. That's called being angry with no good cause. If they really stop and think of for themselves what they're doing, they say it's very unfair. It's not good. Not just. This is not justice. So one thing he said, you would have to stand before a judge for this. Next, what is murder, Jesus? He said, if someone says to his brother or friend or anyone, Raka, what is Raka in Aramaic? It's a word that says, it is nonsense. It is not important. It's trivial. What does that mean? Like what you're complaining about or what your concern is, doesn't mean anything to me. I care less. Or, in common terms, we say, I don't care. And you say it with a vehemence, like, I really don't care. And that means you are actually participating in murder. And this would consider being judged too. And then the last one is the worst. And I actually do this practice in 2nd grade with the school kids. I tell them, okay, let's do a dictionary research on the word fool. Tell me of all the common words you use like fool. And they come up, I can't do it now, this exercise, they come up with like 15 or 20 words, including idiot, jerk, stupid, the S word, you put S word. And there's like a big list of synonyms. And they are all lead to the same idea, that you're actually bringing down, disrespecting, humiliating someone in words, in your vocabulary that you use. There's sophisticated ones that use them in like universities, and there's kindergarten ones that use them in little kids, but they're all the same. This is a big ladder. So this is murder. And then he said, therefore, he says, if you bring your gift to the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go your way. First be reconciled to your brother and then come and offer your gifts. We're going to come to that. So the first chapter, chapter 5 in the Sermon on the Mount, is the law, the new law. How do we understand the law as Christian? It doesn't mean that you didn't stab somebody in the chest, that you have not committed murder. That's what Jesus is saying. So the second one is offering. And we're going to talk about, this is chapter 6 that we read today. So chapter 5 is the law. Chapter 6 is worship. He's going to talk more about this. I'm not going to go through all of it. He talks about adultery. He talks about swearing, which is the old law was. So you start by the Beatitudes and again picks at the old law stipulations, one by one. Murder, adultery, swearing falsely, and etc. But then he leaves us this piece about offering. Let us go to chapter 6, which we started today. What is he talking in chapter 6 about? After he goes through the law, he talks about the item of worship. Jesus explaining to us what worship means. What does it mean to be a servant of God? What are the items of worship he spoke about? So you might hear this commonly in this culture. You say praise and worship. And in your mind, you always think singing. Praise and worship is singing and praying. Jesus did not define praise and worship by just singing and praying. And the Orthodox way to look at it is 3 things. And we sing it during our Lent. Blessed are those who have mercy, who give, who fast, and pray. Those are the 3 items of worship. That's how Orthodoxy define worship. You are an Orthodox, you got to be practicing those 3. So what is the second chapter about? Is worship. How do you show your loyalty, your belonging to God? By giving, fasting, and prayer. Condition. All these have to be done for God, not for other people to see. That's what he's saying here. It doesn't mean that I go hide when I pray. It doesn't mean that I go hide when I give. Actually, your children must see you practice that. By the way, children do not learn by lecturing. They learn by example. Your child will be like you when they get older, even if they are resisting you right now. Whatever they saw you doing, they will be doing. Trust me on this one. So you need to show them. And so it is the purpose of the heart that I'm doing these things for God and I don't care who sees. And here, Raka is okay. Okay, if you say somebody sees me or doesn't see me, it doesn't matter to me, you're absolutely fine. So the second chapter, it's about doing those 3 acts. And specifically, Jesus in the center of it, this is our second part of the talk, he says about prayer, and he says he picks one word from the Our Father. He gives us Our Father. Picks one word. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass. And he talks about it again. We saw that in the chapter 5, actually. We just read it. It says, if you want to do something good, but you remember that your brother have something against you, go reconcile. Chapter 2 is going to talk about forgiveness. They complement each other. Why? If you offer, we just read this, if you offer something and you remember that you have done something wrong to someone, who's guilty? I am guilty. What should I do? I go ask forgiveness. In this one, who is guilty in this one, he says, you have to forgive the trespasses of someone who's guilty against you. So 1 chapter 5, he says, go seek forgiveness. And the other chapter says, go ask someone, or go give forgiveness, you're right, go give forgiveness to someone. So one says, I seek forgiveness to be forgiven. The other one, actually, I forgive. I forgive. The third chapter, so I don't want to keep it long. There's a lot to say about this second one. So the first one is commandments. The second one is worship. What's the third one? It's about Christian living, our daily life. It's more of a wisdom given to us to live peacefully and to live happily. What is this? Do not judge. Because he says, if you judge, you will suffer depression. What it means to be judged? You don't know what that is. Actually, that your life is not joyful. That you feel the joy of God is seeping out. To be judged is to have no feeling of relaxation, that you're not free, you're tight. So, judge not is for me, not for anybody else. What else he says? Do not pick on people and try to go correcting them right and left, because you might do something wrong. What is he saying? Someone who has a big thing in his eye, and I'm sure that if someone has a big stick in their eye, how their eye looks like? Swollen, red, can't see anything. And in this status of agitation and pain and blindness, imagine this person going to try to pick a speck from someone else's eye. What would they do? They will poke their eyes to blindness. So this is bad. That's something else Jesus is saying. This is not a commandment. Do not throw the holy things to the dogs. He's saying if you don't want to be embarrassed and belittled and end up destroying things, do not give holy things to the dogs. What he's saying about that? Don't offer someone who doesn't value it a holy thing. And then he gives us also a way: ask and you will be given, seek and you will find. And he insists on this. And he's saying that change your mind about God the Father. Walk the narrow gate, walk the narrow road, go through the narrow gate. And then he says, beware of false prophets. And then he goes to say that at the end of this, he's giving us the parable of the house built on the rock. So first chapter 5 is commandments. Second chapter is worship, the 3 items of worship. Third chapter is Christian living. Let me just go back a little bit. Which one comes first? Worship or commandments? Commandments come first. And this is very important because you would not know what the prophets are talking about until you get this. There's a verse that I want to read with you with Samuel. We have to go quickly because I'm running out of time. So bear with me. Here is chapter 15. And this is when King Saul, started to do really bad, to go the wrong way. He was given a commandment from God through Samuel the prophet, and he knew it. Saul the king knew this was from God, and he disobeyed it. And then, 2 times he had done this. So he came and he said, the Lord told you not to keep anything from the spoil of this fight with Amalek. And Saul said, but I kept some of it to offer sacrifices to God. I mean, it didn't make sense to me that I destroy these beautiful cattle and oxens. Why can't I keep like a couple of oxens and sheep so I can offer sacrifices? You see, he's using his own mind in his way of thinking to do God's will. And guess what? So Samuel is saying, what then is this bleating of the sheep in my ears and the blowing and the lowing of the oxen which I hear? And Saul said, they have brought them for the Amalekites, for the people spared the best of the sheep and the oxen, listen, to sacrifice to the Lord your God. And the rest we have utterly destroyed. We did it, but we didn't like you said. And then Samuel said to Saul, be quiet. You're babbling. You're saying things that doesn't make sense. I will tell you what the Lord said to me last night. And he said to him, speak on. Then he gives him this. Has the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice. So which comes first, commandments or worship? Commandments. No matter how good we do in prayer or fasting or giving, if we give a whole wealth of money to the church or to the poor, and I'm not listening to God and I'm not doing well in my own inward life, it is not acceptable. Very important. So he goes to say, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft. You know, witchcraft is a no-no. The kings were supposed to kill, basically to execute any witches, anybody who practiced black sorcery. And the other one is stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. To be stubborn, to continue doing your own thing, to insist on your own way when you're told many times. So that's why I grew up in Egypt. I'm very familiar with the fanatic non-Christian and how they say, and it's known actually in their tradition, you can do everything wrong, but you go to visit Mecca and everything will be wiped out. It's upside down. You can be the most horrible person, do all kinds of murders and fornication and adultery, all kinds of things. You steal, but you fast Ramadan, you'll be fine. This is how it is. That's why my uncle, God rest his soul, had a parable. He said, one time there was a fanatic non-Christian running with a machete after a Christian. And they asked him, what are you doing? What did he do to you? And the man looked very drugged. He said, well, you know, in this religion, to drink is a big sin, but to take drugs is not at all. There's nothing against it. So he was on drugs. And he said, because of drugs, I'm poor. I cannot give alms. I cannot fast. And I don't have money to go to Mecca. So the only thing left for me to be righteous in the eyes of God is to kill an infidel. And I'm doing it. This is an extreme. I'm giving you the extreme one. But just to give you the idea that the commandments come before the worship. It comes before. And I cannot really stand before God and offer anything if I have broken his commandment. And the commandment given to the New Testament is love one another as I have loved you. So what is the forgiveness one? I'm going to make it short because I don't have that much time to give you details. He said Jesus actually gave us 6 steps to forgive, for me to forgive. First of all, if somebody had done me something wrong, I need to give him the courtesy and tell him, you have hurted my feeling. And some people say, Abuna, it doesn't work. Nonetheless, go and do it. You've done your share, your part. And that's what Jesus had told us to do. The opposite, if I have hurt somebody feeling, or somebody had hurted my feeling, somebody had hurted my feeling, he said 6 things in the Gospel of Matthew. I'm not going to bother you how we get those, but it's actually very close to each other in the same chapters. Number 1 in this, forgive. Don't wait for anything to happen. Just take it out of your heart. Let that darkness, caged, release it. Let it go. Open that box and let it go. You can't. I cannot. Jesus, I cannot. It's too deep. And I need to offer things to God. I want to go offer my fasting. We're starting Lent. So he said, you cannot forgive? Okay, wait for the person to say sorry. I waited. It's a month now. Nobody said anything. Number 2. Number 3, go tell them. Rebuke them gently between you and them. Jesus said secretly, don't embarrass them because you want to win them. So they said sorry, fine. They didn't. What do you do? He said, bring 2 or 3 witnesses and let them sit with you together. They don't listen to the witnesses, the neutral witnesses. Don't bring anybody that's on your side. 4, that's number 4. Number 5, take them to the church. What does that mean? Take them to the priest, and basically it means take him to the bishop, not the priest. So the priest would have to take you to the bishop, because ultimately the bishop in the church is the judge. He's the king in the church. He's the judge. He is in the place of Christ. So if they don't listen to the bishop, and this happened in my priest's career, I saw this happen at least once. If they don't listen to the bishop, let them be to you as number 6, and the final one, let them be to you as the publican and the heathen. So why Jesus takes us through 6 steps to offer forgiveness, and not just say from the beginning, don't talk to them from the beginning. You have to wait to the 6th degree to reach that point. What do I conclude? What do I conclude from this? Is Jesus says, forgive, wait for apology. Number 3, go rebuke in quietness between you and him. Number 4, take 2 or 3 witnesses. Number 5, take them to the church. And if they don't listen to the church, to the bishop, then they are actually excommunicated. That's the deal. They're excommunicated. They're out of the church. Then you can actually consider them as publican and heathen. Don't talk to them. Sometimes we take it on ourselves. We say, I'm going to excommunicate someone. No, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Why is Jesus doing that? Your own analysis of it. What do you think Jesus doing that for? Because it's important. Because it's a must do. No one should not talk to anybody in the church that are taking communion together unless they reach to that point. And if you are not going to talk to him, it means the whole church is not talking to him. He's excommunicated, she's excommunicated out. It means it's very important. For that reason, it's important to do this first, and then come and fast. Important to do this first, and come and take communion. What is our worship today when we're coming here? It is our anaphora. What do we offer? What do you offer in the liturgy? Jesus. When Abuna lifts up his body and says, the holy body, we do this and everybody's bowing down. Why? That's an awesome, solemn moment. We're actually offering Jesus to his Father. And the Father is receiving him from us, from our hands. The holy body, I'm lifting it up. It is all over again Jesus on the cross. We are offering the Son to his Father. It's an awesome moment. When I learned it first, when I did this the first time, I couldn't contain myself. I couldn't continue the liturgy. It's an awesome moment. And for us to do this, we have to do what Jesus said to do. To go and reconcile. To go and forgive and ask forgiveness. For this, before we even begin, where does it begin? Where does it begin, this offering? The Lord be with you all, and also with you. Lift up your hearts. It is with the Lord. Let us give thanks to the Lord at the beginning of the anaphora. What happens before that immediately? Greet one another with a holy kiss. So before you go and start your offering, what do we need to do? To reconcile. And because of this, and I was reminded by Dr. Albert today, please use no shaking, handshaking, just for, we know that it's a heart process, not a hand process. It's a heart shake, not a milkshake. It's a heart shake, not a handshake, okay? So it's like we do this because we have a lot of flu going around and we don't want anybody to get sick, and people died in this state. So just a side note. I wanted to say it now before we get to it, because we're getting to it very close, very quickly. Let's say 2 words in Arabic. I'm not going to take much. النهارده بنبتدي نحضر للصوم، والتحضير للصوم بتبتدي الكنيسه من اصحاحات 5 و6 و7 في انجيل متى اللي هم الموعظه على الجبل. الثلاثه دول نديهم عناوين: 5 الوصيه، 6 العباده، 7 الحياه المسيحيه. 5 الوصيه، 6 العباده، 7 الحياه المسيحيه. 5 فيها تطويبات، هي دي القانون الجديد، الوصايا الجديده، ان احنا نبقى متواضعين زي يسوع المسيح عشان نبقى نرث الملكوت، نبقى رحومين عشان نترحم، نبقى صانعي سلام عشان ندعى اولاد الله. ده الوصايا الجديده. الوصايا القديمه هيجي يتكلم عليه ربنا يسوع المسيح في نفس الاصحاح، عشان تعرفوا ان ده الاصحاح بتاع الوصايا. يقول: قيل للقدماء لا تقتل، اما انا فاقول لكم. اللي يقول لاخوه يا احمق يستوجب نار جهنم. اللي يغضب على حد باطل يستوجب الحكم. اللي يقول مش مهم، ما يفرقش معايا، يستوجب المجمع. فالقتل ما بقاش قتل بالسكينه ولا بالمسدس، بقى قتل باللسان، لما الانسان يقول الكلام الصعب ده لحد. الاصحاح ده في برضو كلام عن الزنا، وحول ربنا الزنا بالنظر، الزنا بالقلب. فكل الوصايا اللي اتقالت في العهد القديم موجوده في العهد الجديد، بس على مستوى اعلى كتير جدا. عايزين نبقى زي ربنا، تبقى لكي تكونوا ابناء ابيكم الذي في السماوات. الاصحاح الثاني بتاع العباده اللي احنا ابتدينا النهارده هنكمله الاسبوع الجاي. ايه العباده؟ 3 حاجات ربنا يسوع المسيح قالهم. قال ايه؟ متى اعطيت صدقه، متى صليت، ومتى ايه؟ صمت. الصلاه والصوم والعطاء اللي احنا الكنيسه بتعلمها لنا في الترنيمه بتاعه التوزيع، لما يقول ايه؟ طوبى للرحمة على المساكين فان الرحمه تحل عليهم. في الانجليزي بيترجموها يحطوا عليها الصلاه والصوم. الصلاه والصوم واحنا بنقولها في الايه؟ في الاسم: الصلاه والصوم هما اللذان. يبقى العباده فيها صلاه وصوم وفيها عطاء. 3 الكبار دول. اي حد مسيحي يعرف ربنا ويمشي ورا ربنا يسوع المسيح لازم حياته يكون فيها ال3 دول. الاصحاح الثالث عن الحياه المسيحيه: ما ندنش، ما نرميش القدس للكلاب، نعمل ايه مع الناس. قال كده: ماذا تريدون ان يفعل الناس بكم افعلوا انتم هكذا ايضا بهم. الحياه المسيحيه بتاعتنا هنعيشها ازاي؟ فهم 3 اصحاحات: 5 و6 و7 دي الموعظه على الجبل. 1 5 الوصايا، 2 6 العباده اللي هم 3 حاجات، و7 ايه؟ الحياه المسيحيه نعيش ازاي. بيركز ربنا يسوع المسيح النهارده والعشيه وباكر قالوا نفس الانجيل، ان انت عندك حاجه مهمه جدا قبل ما تروح تعمل العباده باللي هتعملها اللي هتقدمها. اذا قدمت قربانك عند المذبح وتذكرت ان في حد عليه حاجه ضدك، بالذات اللي في الكنيسه، انا بتكلم عن الناس اللي في الكنيسه، مش بس اسرتك، مش الناس اللي في الشغل. This is not about somebody outside the church، مش بره الكنيسه. اذا لقيت حد عنده حاجه ضدك تعمل ايه الاول؟ روح الاول اصطلح مع اخاك وبعدين تعالى قدم. يعني الوصيه تيجي قبل الايه؟ العباده. الوصيه تيجي قبل العباده. عشان كده صمويل قال لشاول ايه؟ هل مسرة الرب بالذبائح او المحرقات ام باستماع صوت الرب؟ ان الواحد يسمع صوت ربنا، يسمع كلامه. لان الخطيه، انا اسف، قال كده لان هو قال الاول قبل العناد اللي هو الاصرار على الحاجه. يعني العناد زي عباده الاصنام. ربنا قال كده، وقال ان الواحد ما يسمعش. عدم الاستماع ما يسمعش كلام ربنا زي الساحر، السحرة، حاجه وحشه قوي عند ربنا. والعناد زي ايه؟ عباده الاصنام. فالوصيه تيجي قبل الايه؟ التقدمه، قبل الذبيحه. عشان الانسان يقدم ذبيحه مقبوله لازم يكون سمع وصايا ربنا. الوصيه اللي هيقولها لنا ربنا النهارده واللي عايز اركز عليها الجزء الثاني هي المغفره. 6 نقط قال ربنا نغفر بيهم. 1 اغفر من غير اي حاجه. سيب الحاجه دي وفكها من قلبك وطلعها وانساها. مش قادر، حقيقي مش قادر. قال لك استنى لما الشخص يعتذر. قال لك كم مره ممكن يعمل كده؟ 70 مره، 7 مرات، وافضل اسامحه. قال لك ربنا لازم تسامحه. لما جه قال انا اسف، ما جاش يعتذر، اعمل ايه؟ قال لك عاتبوا بينك وبينه وحدكما. ليه وحدكما؟ عشان ما افضحوش. نمرة 4 ما اسمعش الكلام، اجيب له 2 أو 3 يكونوا محايدين، ما اجيبش الناس بتوعي. ما اسمعش كلام الناس دي، اخده لمين؟ لابونا اللي هياخدنا للاسقف، هو القاضي في الاخر. الاسقف واحده من وظائف القاضي الخمسه، من الاسقف الخمسه هي قاضي. طب ولو ما سمعش الاسقف نعمل ايه؟ فليكن عندك الايه؟ طب ليه يا رب 6 مراحل عشان اوصل للقصه دي؟ ما انا اعزله من الاول وخلاص وبلاش اكلمه. قال لك لا، لو صبح عليك لازم تصبح عليه، لو مس عليك تمس عليه، لازم تتكلم معاه تبتسم في وشه. لو ما قدرتش تعمل كده لازم تخش في الايه؟ في الكورس ده 6. ليه؟ عشان ده مهم جدا. مش هتتقبل حاجه منا واحنا ايه؟ شايلين ضد حد، مش هتتقبل. فالوصيه تيجي قبل العباده. فعشان كده الكنيسه احنا بنقدم ايه في القداس؟ بنقدم وبنستلم يسوع. احنا بنقدم يسوع للاب. من امتى بنعملها دي؟ لما ابونا بيقول الجسد المقدس. على فكره لحظه خطيره جدا دي. انا برفع جسد المسيح وبروح حاطه كده قدام الاب، والاب بيستلمه مني، وبعدين بيدهونا تاني ويقول ايه؟ دلوقتي ده بتاعكم تاكلوه تاكلوه. عشان اوصل للحظه دي ببتدي من حته ايه؟ الرب مع جميعكم مع روحك ايضا، ارفعوا قلوبكم هي عند الرب فلنشكر الرب مستحق وعادل. لما بعد ما برفعه بقى في اخر لحظه في القداس بنقول ابانا الذي، بنكلم الاب بنقول له ابانا الذي في السماوات. احنا بقينا لينا دل عندك بسبب الابن اللي اديته لنا. فعشان اوصل للحته دي لازم ابدا منين؟ قبلوا بعضكم بعضا بايه؟ بقبل المقدس. عشان اوصل لحته ان انا ارفع الذبيحه بتاعتي يبقى لازم اعمل الاول ايه؟ اروح اعمل ايه؟ اصطلح. عشان ما فيش حد في الكنيسه يكون له اي ضغينه او كره لاي حد. دي مصرح للكل، انا بقولها لكم لاي حد في الكنيسه. لو عندك مشكله، لو عندك حاجه عايز تقولها وعايز تطلب مغفره او تطلب من حد يسامحك، اتكلم اللحظه دي. عشان كده الشماس يقول ايه؟ قبلوا بعضكم بعضا بقبلة مقدسة، يا رب ارحم يا رب ارحم يا رب ارحم. نعم يا رب الذي هو يسوع المسيح ابن الله اسمعنا وارحمنا. قدموا التقدمة بتاعتنا. قفوا برعدة والى الشرق انظروا، يعني خلي بالنا ناخد بالنا ما نعليش صوتنا قوي. هو المعنى صح، معناها كده. انا بنقبل بعض بنقول اسف، انا اسف، سامحني، سامحيني، خلصت. وعشان كده برضه ابونا مش هيقدر يشترك في القصة دي، فبيعمل ايه؟ ابونا قبل القداس يقول ايه؟ اخطيت سامحوني، لان هو هيرفع الذبيحه عنكم ومعاكم. فهو كمان محتاج يعمل ايه؟ يطلب المغفره. واحيانا كتير ناس تقول لك انا مش مسامحاك يا ابونا. فيه بيحصل وحصلت كتير، مش مسامحك يا ابونا. طيب خلاص نوقف القداس، ما حدش هيقدر يصلي. اذا حد فكر يعمل كده مع ابونا ما حدش، لان ابونا هيبطل يقدر، ما يقدرش يصلي، مش هيقدر يرفع ذبيحه. فنفضل بقى قاعدين ونعمل ايه؟ محكمه. فلان يقول، ابونا يقول، والشعب يحكم. هي كده، ده القانون بتاع الكنيسه. الشعب يحكم. اذا ابونا غلطان يضرب مطانيه ويصلح الغلط بتاعه. اذا الشخص غلطان هيقول خلاص انا كنت فاهم غلط او وات ايفر، والقداس يكمل. لكن مفيش قداس هيتصلى. انا ده بس اللي هقوله لكم يعني. لكن وسطينا احنا برضو مش هنقدر نصلي في كل واحد على مستواه لغايه لما يغفر ويطلب المغفره. لإلهنا كل المجد الآب والابن والروح القدس. آمين.